Welcome to DataViewM channel. As part of Fabric Series 2026, today we are going to explore SQL Analytics Endpoint. It's quite important to understand SQL Analytics Endpoint if you want to create any kind of analytic solutions in the Fabric ecosystem. First, we will understand what is SQL Analytics Endpoint, what are its features, what are the supported items in Fabric, what are the limitations, and then we will see everything in action in Fabric UI. So let's start. SQL Analytics Endpoint is read-only transact SQL query interface that Microsoft Fabric automatically provides on the top of data tables in OneLake. It's read-only and transact SQL query interface that Fabric automatically provides. So you need not have to do anything. Everything will be taken care by the Fabric itself. Automatically created. So Fabric auto provisions the endpoint, no setup is required. It's read-only, provides a read-only transact SQL or T-SQL interface on data tables. So you cannot write any DML queries, update, insert, delete basically. And it's quite obvious. It queries delta tables, so directly queries delta table is stored in OneLake. And remember, everything in OneLake stored in delta packet format. Uses transact SQL. So transact SQL query syntax is supported for any kind of analytics. Now, transact SQL is different from normal SQL as it is much more powerful. If you are from SQL Server background, you already having a great understanding of this. But in case you are coming from any other database, let's understand the power of transact SQLs. So in normal SQL, you can't write like this. You need to write any kind of conditional logic in a stored procedure. In transact SQL, you can declare some parameters like this, update mode with the @, and you can of course set up the values. And then there can be a conditional logic. In the second example again, we have declared few parameters like min price and category name, and then we are using these variables in a select query. So as you can see, this is not possible in normal SQL unless you write in a stored procedure. So remember that transact SQL is much more powerful. Automatic sync. So tables stay in sync with the underlying delta data. You don't have to do anything for that. But remember, there is a slight delay. No infrastructure. So zero infrastructure setup or management needed. And one of the best thing about that, you can connect to semantic models. And on the top of semantic models, you can create any kind of Power BI report. Now, what are the supported items? Not all items are supported, and it's quite obvious. Let's understand the supported ones. First is Lakehouse. So delta tables in OneLake Lakehouse are auto-discovered and queryable. Auto-discovered because you don't have to do anything. As soon you create a delta table, the sync will happen to the SQL Analytics endpoint, and you can write any kind of transact SQL query on the top of that. Cosmos DB, mirrored Cosmos DB data for NoSQL data is accessible by the SQL Analytics endpoint. So pause for a moment and think. You have data stored in Cosmos DB and you are writing SQL on the top of that data using the SQL Analytics endpoint. Now such thing was not possible in the older times when I started my career, and this is something really great. Mirror databases. Externally, mirror databases like Azure SQL, Snowflake are supported. So if you create a mirror database for Snowflake, then a SQL Analytics endpoint will be created. SQL databases. Fabric supports creation of SQL database item. Now, why do that? Because it wants to support not just analytic workloads, but also transactional processing. And when you have SQL database in Fabric, then the data is automatically synced to the one lake, and there is no need of writing any kind of ETL pipelines. You can also do semantic search in SQL database, just like Azure SQL database. This is for AI purpose. So SQL database is OLTP, and data is replicated to one lake in near real time, which is then exposed by SQL Analytics Endpoint for OLAP or analytics purpose. Note, Event House has no SQL Analytics Endpoint, and you can query data using a language called Gusto Query Language. Its data can be accessed by the other Fabric items by one lake and federation scenarios. And as expected, Fabric Warehouse has no SQL Analytics endpoint because it's anyway provide a full SQL Analytics engine. What are the important features? Views, stored procedure, and function. You can create views, stored procedure, and scalar functions on the top of the data. Advanced analytical queries. So you can write join, you can perform aggregation, any kind of complex analytics across data tables. Row, column, and object level security can be implemented in the SQL Analytics endpoint. So if you want to restrict any kind of access, or if you want to apply fine grade access control, then it's fully supported using SQL permissions. So security is also something you can implement. And Power BI integration, you can build Power BI reports directly from SQL Analytics endpoint after creating a semantic model. Cross workspace queries. So use one lake shortcuts to join delta tables from other workspaces. So if your data resides in other workspaces, you can use the one lake shortcuts to join the delta table. And the best practice, do not treat the SQL Analytics endpoint as a warehouse. Now, you might be wondering, instead of creating a Fabric warehouse, why can't we just use the SQL Analytics endpoint? But that really depends. It's just a SQL access layer. So in case multiple users hitting the same maybe table data or the semantic model, then there might be some performance issues. So suggestion is always test your query performance in case you are working in a big enterprise. So remember that. Now let's see what are the limitations, because it's quite important to understand the limitations. I suggest whenever you work on any tool or any kind of architectural design, always conscious of the best practices and the limitation. Great engineers even know the architectural aspects, limitations, best practices, not just coding or creating any kind of analytical solutions. So first, the delta packet format required. So data must be in delta packet format to be auto-discovered in the SQL Analytics endpoint. Data has to be in data packet format. Tables must be in slash tables folder. Delta tables created outside of the tables folder, like in files, are not available. But you can, of course, load that data into tables. Using a pipeline. So tables must be in tables folder. In case you have some data in files folder, that won't be reflected in the SQL Analytics endpoint. Now there are some unsupported column types, as it quite obvious in Lakehouse. Uh, there are some Spark column types like array type, map type, struct type, timestamp, NTZ, and semi-structure variant columns that is not supported in SQL Analytics endpoint. So whenever any delta table created in SQL Analytics endpoint, always check the data types. That's my suggestion to you. Because you might notice a change or some of the columns are not supported, as I mentioned here. Sync delay. Automatic sync may have a short delay. There is the option of manual refresh, and that is possible by even REST API or by opening the SQL Analytic endpoint. As soon you open it first time, then the metadata sync triggers. And even there is an option to check the last successful update timestamp on one lake that you should check in case you notice any kind of data mismatch happening between the source item and the SQL Analytics endpoint. Let's see everything in action now. This is my craft testing workspace in Fabric. As you can see, there is a Lakehouse item and even a SQL Analytics endpoint. Let's open this Lakehouse first. This Lakehouse has two delta tables, the inquiries and the UK properties delta tables. And under the files, it has two files, inquiries.csv and UK properties data.csv. Now, how to access SQL Analytics endpoint? It's quite simple. You can click on that and change it to SQL Analytics endpoint. There's an option of syncing the metadata from the lakehouse, refresh. You can click on that in case you want that. But when you open this screen first time, then the metadata sync happen automatically. And here are a few other options. This SQL Analytics endpoint interface remains same no matter what is the source. If it's the lakehouse, if it's any kind of metadatabase, this stays the same. Okay, so there are few important options. You can write a SQL query. You can write even a visual query in case you don't want to write a code. So let's see. So if I'm creating and even there's an option now to write a SQL query in a notebook. So let's just create a SQL query first. And here under the DBO, there will be tables, views, function, and stored procedures. So let's click on tables. I can see there are two tables. And if I want to see I can even create a SQL query here, select top 100, or I can insert the table into canvas. I can also see the properties. So when you click on properties, you can see some metadata, and there's some important fields like format, type is managed, it created, URL, relative URL, ABFS part, but the most important field is last synced updates from one lake. So when this data is updated, you can see here in case you notice some kind of mismatch. Let's just write the query. So I can write select, and remember it's always good to write the specific column list in any kind of distributed system. So I'm just want to fetch inquiry ID and inquiry property ID, email. Let's say email and phone from dbo dot inquiries. So this is a simple SQL query. Now I can format this if I right click, select that and right click. You can see format document, and you can also change all occurrences, cut, copy, paste. There's even a command palette which you can get even by pressing F1. So if I click on format document, it will format the query and I can run that now. In case the copilot is enabled, you can also use the explain query command, but you cannot write explain here because remember it is just a SQL interface, not exactly a SQL analytics engine or SQL engine. Right, I can write any kind of query, so I can even say where email at rate example.com. So it's possible you can even join the data in case the data is related. Let me just write a join query. So this time I will say dbo inner join dbo.uk properties data. This I will say it's E. Let's reference it so that it's, and this I say P, and then I can say on condition on E dot property ID equal to P dot property ID, and here I can also fetch E dot property ID. Okay, so any kind of SQL query you can write. You can also save it as a view option. So if I select this view, I can even save as a view. I can say vw get property inquiries, and it will show you the view definition. I can even copy to clipboard. So there's a nice option. I can click on OK, and it's creating a new view. Successfully created new view. Now if I go here and click on view, I can see this view. Okay, so things remain same. Now there is some important metadata tables that I want to show you. There's a query insights. So under the query insights, you can see your long running queries, your execution request history, your execution sessions history, then frequently run queries, long running queries, SQL pool insights. So you can see some amazing stuff using these views. Let me just check one. And if I click on new, then it will do a select of 100. Select permissions on external policies or denied on the object. Some performance, there's some access issue. Let's write this query, long running queries, and I can see my data. So median total, last run total, and you can explore it further. Under sys, you can see views and store procedure. And this is similar to the SQL database. So you can see all views, then lots of metadata views are available here. That's a huge list. So if I go to store procedures, I can again see lots of store procedure, add agent parameter, profile. There are so many. Change feed, drop message, DD policies. You can explore. It's a long list. You can even implement security, as I already mentioned, row level security, column level security, object level security is fully supported here. You can create a new semantic model uh, for any of these tables. When I click on here, I can create a direct lake semantic model, and it's two options on lake or SQL. We will explore this in the next video, and you can choose the tables. And then once you create the semantic model, you can create amazing Power BI reports on the top of that data. And direct lake mode, you don't have to do anything. Data is automatically refreshed just like the SQL Analytics endpoint in case of any updates. Fabric team has launched this direct lake mode, which is a bit different from import and direct query mode. I don't want to prolong this video, so we will discuss everything in next one. Okay, so you can even share your queries. So if I go here and click on three dots, I have option to move to shared queries in case you want others to use those queries, and you can of course rename and delete. You can download it as a SQL database project. You have all sort of options. Now there is even an API for GraphQL. I have already covered GraphQL in detail in other videos, so you can explore in case you want to do that. But when you click here, it will simply create a GraphQL item, and then you can write GraphQL queries. Okay, as you can see, there's something called query activity. When you click on that, you can see even the long running queries, frequently run queries on this page, and it will show you run count, success, failed. Everything is here, all the important metadata. This is for it's Lakehouse. Now let's go to Cosmos DB, and whenever you want to find any item which is already created, the best way is use the browse. And I don't remember, so I can go Cosmos because there's a possibility there are multiple workspaces created, and it become difficult sometimes to identify. So browse is the best option. You can even mark some of it as favorites. So let's go to the Cosmos DB test, and there's a SQL Analytics endpoint. As you can see, it's created. Location is workspace, identity, testing, modified workspace. So you can see that. Now let me click on SQL Analytics endpoint here. And this will look exactly the same as I told you. There is no difference. There is again a refresh button, and you can now write. So there is something called Cosmo DB test schema. which I've created. Let me just browse the data again. So it's all SQL you're writing, but the actual data is stored in Cosmos DB. Great. There's even option of opening in Visual Studio Code or a SQL Server Management Studio. And of course, Copilot support is there. Mine is trial capacity, that's why it's disabled. But in case you have a paid one, you can use Copilot to write any kind of SQL query. Now let's go to the browser again, and I have created a SQL database. So let me show you. When you click on SQL database, now here you can't see the analytics endpoint here, but when I go inside and again click on here, you can see the SQL Analytics endpoint. But notice that was not visible when I go to the browse option, unlike Lakehouse and Cosmos DB1. So same thing, if you open again, it's the same. Nothing will change. So this UI remain same and all the options as well. Let's create a new item because even I want to show you how that whole thing will appear. So if I click on new item and suppose I create a lake house, let me give a name, let's take 111. A SQL Analytics endpoint for SQL querying is being created with this item. So as I said, it's taken care by Fabric and it's being created. Now remember, all the data tables which you have under the tables, that will only appear in the SQL Analytics endpoint. It will not take care of the ones which are under the files. But of course, you can either load the data or create a pipeline. There are a number of ways you can load the data into the tables folder. It's taking with more time today. Let's refresh once. Okay, so SQL Analytics endpoint has been created. Um, Currently, the SQL Analytics endpoint won't have any kind of data because there are no delta tables. Now, let me show you. Right. Now, let's just create a delta table. So, what I will do, I will create a table shortcut. I have option of even creating file shortcuts. Let's create a shortcut. on the tables. I have already created a video on shortcuts which you can refer if you want to explore more about shortcuts. So there's a schema shortcut and there is something called table shortcut. So I'm going to create a table shortcut this time. So new table shortcut, and I already have data which is stored in the UK Latinx one. So I will just click on this, and under the tables I have UK properties and inquiries. I can select whatever I like. I have just selected the UK properties and I will click on create. Now, as soon the data is appeared, if I open the SQL Analytics endpoint, remember when I opened it first time, the metadata sync happened, and we can now let's just oops, okay, so okay, there is something not looking right, so let's just refresh it. Sometime it happened in Fabric. I'm sure they will fix these kinds of issues soon. Okay, great. Now we can see the testing 1.1, and under the schema, you will be able to see the table, UK properties data. And as I mentioned before, it's quite important to understand the last sync update from Burn Lake timestamp 7:20:08. Great. So I think I have covered everything which is important. Uh, we invest a lot of time and efforts to create quality videos for everyone. So I appreciate if you can like and subscribe. And next, we are going to cover the direct lake, how we can create a Power BI report using the SQL Analytics endpoint data after we create the semantic model. So stay tuned for more amazing videos. Thank you so much. Take care of your health.